Ford had declared all-out war on Ferrari, fielding their brutal 7.0-liter GT40 monsters, blunt force hammers designed to crush the prancing horse into history. The world saw speed and power. Dan Gurney saw a flaw. Tall, calm, and lethal behind the wheel, Gurney was more than a driver. He was a thinker, an engineer in a racing suit. To him, brute force was a short-lived weapon. Le Mans demanded more than muscle. It demanded efficiency, endurance, precision. Gurney wanted an engine that could breathe like no other, lighter, stronger, smarter. He began sketching the impossible: alloy heads instead of Ford's heavy cast iron, inlet ports angled at 9 degrees instead of the crude 20, ports perfectly round for unbroken airflow, and heart-shaped combustion chambers to wring every ounce of power from each explosion. This wasn't an upgrade. It was a revolution on paper. But who could build such mechanical madness? Gurney crossed the Atlantic to Rye, England, a small coastal town hiding a giant of engineering. Harry Westlake, the quiet airflow magician behind BRM and Van Wall Glory, worked there in a modest workshop that smelled of cutting oil and possibility. Westlake studied Gurney's hand-drawn schematics, running his fingers over the lines like a map of buried treasure. Dan had the driver's instinct, Westlake would later say. I had the geometry. In that moment, the Gurney-Westlake was conceived. Ford Advanced Vehicles FAV in Slough was tasked with casting the first Mark I heads. On paper, it should have been flawless. In reality, it was a nightmare. The ports were rough, the castings porous, and mechanics cursed the things as porcelain princesses, beautiful but fragile. In Santa Ana, California, at Gurney's All-American Racers AAR shop, Chief Engineer John Miller was drowning in defective prototypes. "We'd get heads from England," Miller remembered bitterly, "and half were scrap. The ports looked like they'd been carved with a chisel by a blind man." Time was bleeding away. Ford wanted results. Le Mans waited for no one. The dream that could rewrite endurance racing was buckling under the weight of its own ambition. But Gurney had no intention of letting the story end here. The revolution had already begun, whether the world was ready or not. The meeting in the Rye Westlake was no ordinary engineer.